And welcome back. It's episode of the Clue Jets podcast. We're Ben Blessington and Michael Nania. Well, Michael, the Jets have finally reported to training camp. The long, dark days of the NFL summer has finally come to a conclusion. We actually have real football to talk about the next few weeks as we head into preseason and the regular season. So very excited that we won't have to conjure up topics, but we have one more episode of doing just that. Thank you to everybody who submitted a mailbag question. Michael, before we get into the mailbag questions, how you doing, man?
I'm absolutely excited because, like you said, I mean, these dark days of the NFL offseason are very taxing on the brain of an NFL fan, especially when you're someone like us who's covering them consistently because, man, you just got to dig so deep to try to find things to talk about. I'm so tired of seeing workout videos from the NFL's Twitter account. I'm so tired of Madden ratings. All this nonsense. I'm tired of cornerback rankings.
You're talking about the uniform
Samuel,
pants and the Titans
talking
throwbacks.
about uniform pants. Although that, I won't get tired of that. That's for sure.
Yeah, we're definitely
any day of the year.
More of that.
It'll be Super Bowl week, and we'll be debating which uniform they should be wearing. So that I don't get tired of. But the other stuff, I've had more than my fill of that, and I'm looking forward to, even if it's just training camp, and that has its own caveats in terms of how much it matters. It's still football. It's something. And I'm very much looking forward to, seeing how this very interesting Jet season is going to play out. And it all starts right now.
Just because we can't help ourselves. Do you think the Jets are getting a throwback? A lot of teams have been releasing throwbacks the last week or two. You think the Jets are going to be in that group? They haven't had a media day, which they normally do at OTAs. So I don't know. That's kind of signaling to me that maybe they're saving their photo shoot until after an announcement. But what do you think?
I think you're right. That's the point that you brought up to me. They haven't had media day yet. You also brought up to me the date that they unveiled the black helmets last year, which I think was the 20th, 22nd, sometime right around right now. And I forgot it was that late in the offseason that they unveiled those. So I do think there's a very real chance we could see something soon. Especially I saw the Seahawks are going to be putting theirs out tomorrow. I think Quandre Diggs said that. So I could definitely see it. I think it's going to happen.
So with the two helmet shell rule and the fact that you only get 3 games wearing an alternate, are you scrapping the black helmet or are you changing out the face mask and the decal on the green helmet for a throwback? How are you doing this, Michael? This is normally a topic saved for the way end of the pod, but might as well just...
We're getting right into it. We're finally back and we're hopping right into the uniforms, just like everyone wanted. But I think... For me, I know a lot of people talk about the Titans throwbacks. I think Mekhi Becton even had a tweet saying like he loves them. And, I'd be down for that. I'm okay with that. But
no.
I really think what you said, no?
Well, could you imagine if they build up throwbacks and it's the Titans throwbacks and not the 80s ones that everybody's been
I agree. I'm just trying to give some,
right.
Just say for the people who do like it that I can get, I can understand it. Your appeal for it. So, but for me, I think that the right way to go is to keep the black helmets and just for the throwbacks, go ahead and slap that 80s logo on the green helmet shell. Have a couple games with the
put the white
whatever
white
jersey you choose
too, right?
The white face mask, throw that on there, and then get a couple games with the 80s uniform, a green one, get a white one in there. That's how I would do it. I would do that instead of the Titans throwbacks. And I like the white jersey Titans throwbacks. That I can tolerate. The blue ones, I'm not a huge fan of those.
Hard-hitting analysis on the uniforms, as always. Well, I guess we can hop into the...
All right, so we'll talk to you guys next
week. This is it. We do have a bunch of mailbag questions. Thank you again to everybody who submitted them. And at the end, we'll give our pre-training camp 53-man roster predictions that will inevitably be wrong. There's always surprises and trades and undrafted guys you didn't expect to make it. So we tried to do our best to, I wouldn't say we went too far out of the ordinary with our predictions, but we'll see. So that's at the end of this podcast. But first, Michael, let's just hop right into it. From Sun Moon Rise 31, how strong is this Jets roster really? If you had to rank the skill position groups in comparison to the rest of the league, where would you rank the Jets? He has a second question as well, but let's just stop there. When you look around, we've had a few weeks now, Michael, in this dead period to really be forced to look elsewhere for football content and look at other teams. And I know Madden ratings are coming out, although you can't trust those, because didn't you tell me that they had Bryce Hall rated higher than Michael Carter II?
They did, by 3 points.
And AVT's a 70. So, okay, scrap that. But we've had time to look at, the rosters around the league. How do you feel this Jets roster stacks up? Is it just the Rodgers hype, or is this team legit?
I mean, I do think it is legitimately a top 10 or so kind of roster. The question is just, can they answer some of the issues and concerns that they have to become a legitimate Super Bowl kind of team? Because, you look at last year's team, I think the defense was clearly a top five kind of defense, maybe top three, elite, however you want to rank it. And then offensively, we know what the issues were. Worst quarterback play in the league, banged up offensive line, but there was plenty of intrigue with the weapons when healthy. And it was mostly with younger players who should only progress going forward. So we knew last year that the pieces were in place. They got the quarterback that they needed. Um, it's just, some of those bottom end issues of the roster because I think when I look at Super Bowl winning teams, and, no team is perfect, even the ones that do win the Super Bowl, but for the most part, they're deep. They don't have a lot of significant weaknesses that teams can hone in on in the playoffs. And I think that's what makes them great. When you look at the Chiefs, when you look at, I think that Rams team a couple years ago was very complete. And then, of course, the Patriots all those years. I think championship teams are very balanced all around. And the Jets do have a couple weaknesses that I think they need to solve before we can definitively say this is a team that can win the Super Bowl. Well, I mean, I think they can, but before we can say, they have a good chance to do it, we have to see, can the O-line stay healthy and have some of these guys play up to their ceilings? Then defensively, like, there are some holes in there. Can the linebacker unit hold up? The safety unit, especially, I should have mentioned them before, the linebackers, but, can they avoid being a magnet for big plays? Last year, the Jets were able to survive with the safety play, but can they do that a second year in a row? So there are some concerns across this roster, but with the defensive line depth and just the elite top end talent of the defense at corner, at defensive tackle with Sauce and Quinnen, and the cornerback unit and its strength, how good that unit was compared to the rest of the league. Then offensively with Garrett Wilson, with Brees Hall, um, tight end unit, I think it is underrated with Conklin at the top, and then the depth of the wide receivers. I think the talent is legitimate. It is a very good roster, and I don't think it's biased to say that. But I think if you're being pragmatic, you also have to acknowledge some of the weaknesses and understand that they have to answer some of these questions before we could say this is a bona fide Super Bowl team. So I guess that's how I would summarize it. Is there anything you
Well,
would say differently?
how would you rank the skill position, at least within the AFC East? Because I think it's fair to say that the Dolphins receiving room is the best in the division. After that, would you put the Jets above the Bills? Stephon Diggs has proved himself maybe a little bit more than Garrett Wilson, but I think you could argue this Jets receiver room is a little deeper with Davis, Lazard, and Hardman. Nice to throw Cobb in there as well, but he did ask if you rank the skill position groups. I guess you bring up a good point with the tight ends. So they are kind of underrated, and I think a lot of our perceptions of these guys is being based off of how they looked with Zach Wilson. But when you see Tyler
Right.
Conklin and Uzama with Aaron Rodgers, I think you're going to have a whole different level of production. I mean, this is a guy who's getting great games out of Robert Tunyon 2 years ago. So I think this skill position group is number 2 in the AFC East. I would say. I mean, especially if you're factoring in the running backs. What about you?
I think that's fair. Like, definitely give it to Miami number one, because you can't argue with what Hill and Waddle did last season. I mean, they were incredible. So I would definitely give them number one. But I think the Bills. I was looking at their depth chart, and you know, Diggs, you can give the edge over Wilson right now just because of track record. But I think in year two with better quarterback play, Wilson can make a case to be toe to toe with Diggs. And then number two, I mean, Gabe Davis, he had his chance last year to really establish himself, and he kind of didn't do that. So I don't think he's probably a wash compared to whoever you would put as the Jets' second receiver. Then after that, I think the Jets take the edge because their third guy right now, I mean, beyond Diggs and Davis, it's Trent Sherfield, Khalil Shakir, Deontay Hardy, Justin Shorter, fifth round pick this year. So
Yeah.
they're really lacking in the depth. So I think the Jets edge them out there. Uh, Dawson Knox is a good tight end, but at running back, they're not. I mean, they have some solid guys with Cook. They got Damian Harris. They got Latavius Murray. So there's some depth, guys who have experience, but none of them. At running back, you either have that elite guy or you don't. That's how I think I see it. Most of the running backs in the league are kind of the same. Like, they'll just perform up to whatever the O-line blocks up for them. But then there are a few guys who really move the needle, and I think Brees Hall is one of those guys if he's healthy.
Do we want to
So
broach into the running back topic? It's been big news this week.
we can do that. It's been big news this week, but yeah, just to round that one up, I would give the Jets the skill position over Buffalo.
All right, well, just because we just talked about it. Barkley not getting the extension with the Giants. The only reason I think it's worth talking about is the Jets do have a relatively high profile young running back in Brees Hall. We don't have to worry about his contract for a few more years, but there should be ripple effects from the devaluation of running backs, which it isn't great to say, but I do agree with. It is the most replaceable position in football. Doesn't mean that all these guys are replaceable. Certainly saw the drop off when the Jets lost Brees Hall, but just so much of their production is based off of the offensive line, and there's just a short shelf life. And so, how do you feel about it?
I mean, I'm not with the running backs here. I think the NFL teams are finally doing this correctly, is what I think, because I'm not a running backs don't matter kind of guy, because I think they do matter. Like I said, if you have an elite game changing guy like Brees Hall was at the beginning of last year, like I think Nick Chubb is right now, Derrick Henry has been, they're his prime years the past few seasons. Saquon the first half of last season I think was a real game changer. They can make a difference. I think it matters less than any other offensive or defensive position, and it's just because I think it comes down to the core aspects of the game, and that's just the fact that running the football is a team thing. It's run blocking first and foremost. It's the play calling. It's how does a passing game affect the numbers you get in the run game, and the running back is kind of just a product of all of that. And again, there are some really good guys who can outperform it consistently, but it really just comes down to those other factors more so than anything else, at least compared to other positions. Because, like, if you're talking about a tackle or a guard, or if you're talking about a defensive lineman, like, you're not really doing much to help those guys. What they do, like what they produce for you, is entirely a product of how good they are individually. But for a running back, it's just there are so many other factors that dictate what they produce for you. So I think teams are starting to realize that and just understand we don't have to invest premium assets on this position because we can throw anybody in there, and as long as our offensive line is good, our play calling is good, and we're threatening through the air to give ourselves good numbers in the run game, we can run the football no matter who's back there. And I think we've seen a lot of examples of that in recent years with teams drafting running backs late, throwing them in there, and they produce really efficiently. And then I think there's the career span aspect of it. These guys rack up a lot of hits early, and they start declining much earlier than most other positions, which is the reason they can't get those second contracts, or why teams are hesitant to give them away. So I think it's just the replaceability we've seen with late round picks having success. It's the short career spans, and it's just the fact that teams are realizing, I think, that running back is more of a beneficiary position than it is a position that kind of creates what's happening. At least that's how I see it. So I agree with the way teams are starting to value running backs. They don't not matter, but there is a limit to where I think you shouldn't go past in terms of the money, how you should be valuing what their effect is on winning games. So that's how I see it.
Yeah, the ripple effects at lower levels of football is going to be fascinating because I think people have kind of had the sentiment about running backs pretty much since Le'Veon Bell, if not before. But I think in the next 5-6 years, you're going to see a lot more receivers who have after the catch ability, like a Deebo Samuel, and less maybe high end talent at running back. Just because if you're a high school player and you're a 5-star recruiter, are you going to go try to play running back right now? I mean,
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. It'll be fascinating to watch and something to, we have this season to worry about and a few other ones to worry about. But Brees Hall, second round pick, only had that he has 3 years left on his deal, so something to keep an eye out for. If he is the player who we expect he is,
right.
That's
and I think Douglas has done a nice job of adhering to some of the philosophies I talked about, because he has not spent much money on running backs on veteran players in free agency. Yeah. He's drafted one every single year out of the 4 drafts that he's had. And in terms of, is Tevin Coleman the most expensive free agent he got? And that was a very inexpensive deal. So I think, he's understands the way the running back position is headed. And, if Brees Hall is an amazing player, if he continues to do what he did the last the first 6 games of last year. He does that on a consistent basis for the duration of his rookie contract. And yeah, by all means, you can extend him, especially because he's a younger guy. He was 21 last year, so he should be
Right.
going
Well,
into his
and he has the receiving
age,
ability, which is a big
and he's
thing.
the receiving ability, which you definitely want out of your running backs today. So he'll be going into his age 25 season when the contract's up. I think he's an exception to where he could be someone you want to extend. But that's a few years down the line. We'll see what happens. But for the most part, I think Douglas has understood that running backs, like, get them early in the draft. Use young guys who are cheap. You're getting them in their prime because running backs peak during that rookie contract for the most part. And I think that's the most efficient way to manage that position.
We're in prime form, Mike. We're not even through the first question, and we're already strayed way off the point. But I think it's let's just get it.
We're
There's a
already how
second
many
part,
minutes in, and we've
like
only done one
15.
question.
Yeah, well, not even one, because he had a part two to his question. Another one from @SunMoonrise31. He said, "Do you think the Jets will play a lot of nickel defense to make up for coverage deficits at safety and or linebacker?" Fascinated to see the usage. That was the end of his question, but I'm fascinated to see the usage because of the Chuck Clark injury. I kind of assumed the Jets are going to play a lot of big nickel with Clark in the box, and we were talking about this beforehand. Do we expect Amos or Whitehead to fill that role and be kind of a pseudo safety linebacker? Given the Jets haven't brought back Quan yet, when they go to that base look, do we still expect to see maybe Amos in the box, Whitehead as a strong safety, and Tony Adams as the free safety? Or do we think they scrap that idea because Chuck Clark has got injured? They either bring back Quan or they give Jamie Sherwood a bigger role, and your safety duo is made up of Adams, Amos, and Whitehead.
Yeah, there's a lot of different options they could go because of Quan not being here. You look at the safety unit, and I think you have two guys. Your two veteran starters who have starting experience are both similar skill sets. Neither Amos or Whitehead are ideal in that deep part of the field, and both of them are at their best when they're in the box and making tackles. So you have that, and then you also have Tony Adams in there who is better suited to play deep. Granted, small sample size last year, you don't know for sure if he's ready.
A game and a
But
half.
it was an impressive game and a half, to be fair. But we've seen plenty of Jets players have good games and a half and completely bust. But at least skill set wise, that is the type of player that he projects to be. So you have that possibility of, what if you start Adams and one of these guys, and then use the other one as that sub player instead of Quan
Right.
in the box, because you didn't replace Quan with someone you trust as much. Or maybe they do just trust Sherwood to step up and fill Quan's role. He's been developing for the past 2 years. He was a project guy anyway, transitioning from safety, and it seems like he's a player that they like. He was going to fill in, or he did fill in and start for Jared Davis in his rookie year, and they seem to talk highly about his intelligence and IQ and all the fundamental aspects of the position. So, and I mean, he played last year a few snaps throughout the season in relief and looked pretty good, especially towards the end of the year. Even smaller sample than Adams. I think he played like 25 snaps or something, but I'm pretty sure he had 10 tackles and 25 snaps, which is pretty insane. That's like less than half a game's worth. He got 10 tackles, but again, let's not even talk about those.
That's a 2020 CYJ type of answer. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, the second half of this Bills game, Michael Pirine was just lighting it up. We got a lot to look forward to, and those were crazy times.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, you remember like all those multi-score blowouts where we just try to focus on the smallest plays by the rookies to be happy about.
Oddly enough, may have been the most consistent we've been with this podcast.
Yeah. To be fair, none of us really had anywhere to go.
That's true. That is true.
Particular point in time.
I think you're going to see out of the two of them, I think it'll be, if they go big nickel and want to put a safety in the box, I think it's Amos. I've seen this weird narrative that Amos is a free safety, and like he may end up playing some reps there because he's done it. But just from what we've seen from Tony Adams, I'll take Adams. And it's not like the Saleh and Tony Oden don't have a history of developing, maybe under projected DBs. I mean, you just think about Michael Carter II, who's already one of the best nickel corners in the league, despite whatever Madden says. And again, different circumstances entering 2021, but that was a 6th round pick that they just tossed out to be a starter, and look where he's come. So I think this organization believes in their ability to develop guys. He's had a whole year on the bench. I think he did impress in limited action, and I think he's really out of all the guys they have, unless Ashton Davis decides to finally take a big step. He's the only guy that kind of really fits that profile of being a deep center fielder. I just think Amos got beat too often for my liking, and this defense is based off of preventing the big explosive plays. So I mean, Amos might play some reps there, but I think out of all the safeties, who's most likely to fill Chuck Clark's role? I think it would be Amos. He's the biggest at 6 feet 214, and I just don't trust Jordan Whitehead to not get blown out of the play or overrun the play or miss the tackle. Because I think that's the thing with Clark, is he was just so sound that it really is a bummer of an injury. But that's what people, I don't think, give enough credit to Quan, and why I do think there's a good chance Quan will be back is his run defense. I think that was the weakness that we saw in this wide nine front in 2021. Granted, they had worse players and they were a little bit more vanilla with their scheme, but we saw teams kind of expose it at times. I mean, especially in that Seattle game. There are holes in this defense if you could run the football, especially if your linebackers aren't plugging gaps. And all it takes is one injury, or maybe Mosley loses a step, or Quincy, he has the tendency to overrun plays sometimes. Like, Quan did fill a big role in terms of the run defense, and I do think he'll ultimately be back. But if not, I think Amos is the guy that could play a lot of that big nickel third linebacker. Outside of that, though, I do agree with you. I liked what we saw from Sherwood again, though. It's, he has the physical makeup with those long arms. He's exactly what the Jets kind of look for in drafting physical traits, but we just haven't seen enough of him to rely on him. So I think Quan ultimately comes back.
Yeah, I'm like 49, 51. In terms of him coming back, I feel like it would have happened already if it was going to. But
didn't he sign Didn't he sign after training camp started last
right,
year?
That's true. Like, I think it was even later than this point when he signed last year. So it could definitely still happen. I'm kind of on the fence about it. I'm thinking it could be a sort of situation where it's like, he's told the Jets that, look, I want a starting spot, so I'm going to hold out. I'm going to wait and see if someone gets hurt, a starting spot opens up, someone wants me to come in and play that role for them. But if that doesn't happen and enough time goes by, then I'll come back and play the same role because, he's been in the scheme. He's with Saleh in San Francisco, so plenty of familiarity. He doesn't need the training camp time as much as some other players might. So I could see that sort of situation where he's just waiting it out, seeing if he can get a better opportunity, and we'll come back later if he doesn't get it.
Well, I did see something that the Jets now, even after we didn't even mention the Quinnen Williams extension. Jeez. Glad that they got that done. Pretty much in line with.
That's what makes us special. We mentioned helmet shells before Quinnen Williams extension.
Jeez.
20 minutes before.
Yeah.
Also.
Pretty in line with, I guess, kind of the numbers that have been floated out. But the thing that I found interesting is that the Jets, I should double check the exact amount, but I think they have $24 million in cap space. I'll get maybe 24.5 or something like that. You imagine most of that money is going back to Aaron Rodgers, which I'm curious to see when that restructure is announced, to see if does Rodgers take a bit of a pay cut to save the Jets, some
25.8 according
25.8. So you'd imagine a lot of that money is going to go to Rodgers to save them. What's their cap hit for next year for him again?
Spot Track says 24.6. I never know why there are differences between the two, but same ballpark.
What was Rodgers' cap hit in 2024 again? Just so I'm not 107 million. Yeah. So a lot of that money is going to be pushed back into this year. And then we'll see if
he wins the Super Bowl, he can have that.
Yeah. Probably a lot of void years. If there's no pay cut, probably a ton of void years on this inevitable restructure. But we'll see whenever that comes out. But ultimately, they have the cap space. I don't anticipate them signing anybody else outside of maybe Quan. But yeah, congrats to Quinnen Williams. Glad they got that done. Avoided the nightmare. The other thing,
they still have to get a McDonald and Tippmann signed.
Yes, right? We have a whole week to look forward to offset language tweets, because that's all it comes down to. But yeah, they might be a few days late. I don't anticipate a big holdout for either of those guys. I bet you Tippmann. Second rounders normally come in before the first rounder, so I bet you Tippmann gets done maybe tomorrow, and then McDonald maybe like Friday or Thursday. Who knows? I'm just pulling that out of my ass. I have no idea, but I don't expect that to be a big training camp storyline. The other big training camp story, I know we have a mailbag here, but I figure this is the mailbag question from @Ben W. Blessington. Michael, what do you think about Hard Knocks being official?
I'm looking forward to it. I mean, from an outsider's perspective, how can you not be excited? I don't think we could legitimately expect it to make the team worse, even if they're distracted by it. I mean, I fully
Yeah, last
understand
time
why
they
they.
were,
Yeah, exactly. Last time it turned out pretty good. I mean, like I said, I fully understand why they don't want it there. If I were on the team, I wouldn't want it there. But from our perspective, it's just makes it more entertaining. So, looking forward to
yeah,
it.
I'm curious to see how much they show because there's already been reports about it being
Right.
a little less access because part of why probably the Jets fought so hard that maybe HBO won't have the same access, but probably more so than we'll get from One Jets Drive. Like I'm curious how much of the team meetings and Solemn meeting one on one with a player and like how much of that stuff do we get? Because that's really the interesting part of Hard Knocks. It's not really like the training camp highlights and individual player stories. I want to see the behind the scenes. So we'll see how much of that we actually get. But I agree. Like I'm excited about it. I know a lot of fans were worried about it being a distraction, but like might as well just embrace the season.
Joe Douglas already has a reputation on
Yeah,
Hard
the
Knocks.
Turk.
He was the Turk releasing players with the Ravens. So
Maybe
it's funny to
that's
think
why.
back to that. Yeah, maybe that. Yeah, I just realized that right now because I was there are those headlines that have been out there that the Jets think it's inhumane to show players getting released on Hard Knocks, and it just hit me right now that Joe Douglas was literally the guy doing that for the Ravens back in the day on
Yeah.
Hard Knocks. So I
So
wonder if
maybe that's
that
why.
played a role in you know why the team isn't too fond of the idea of showing
Oh, who's
releases.
early prediction on Hard Knocks star? Who's like going to be the main? I mean,
Clemens,
there's always a
I,
few.
Clemens is a good candidate.
Clemens is up there. I bet you we're going to have a
Um,
lot of Zach Wilson trending. All it'll
should
take
be
is
a lot
one
of
bag of
sauce. I mean, not that he's a Hard Knock star, like not a star already, but
Ron Middleton.
uh, that's a good one. That's a great pick right there. But I'm trying to think of like some under the radar guy.
I could see Hackett's
Maybe
like gold
Hardy.
zone
I don't
stuff.
know.
Maybe what was
Joe
it, Jerome
Tidman with
Cap.
the mullet
Jerome Cap doesn't that
cap.
kind of he was
Yeah.
going off at minicamp. Kind of seems like one of those under the radar. They always find the under the radar guys to kind of focus in on and see if they can make it. So a lot of times the stars are like the undrafted free agents. They're trying to cling to the roster. But it'll be interesting with you. At Cam42 Go, out of all the second year players, who do you think will improve the most and who will disappoint the most and why? Um, it's hard to pick somebody to disappoint without sounding like a hater because I don't think it's fair to say like Max Mitchell will disappoint the most because that just seems kind of like a cop out answer. It seems like, all right, out of the four primary picks from last year, I guess five if you throw in Ruckert, between Sauce, Garrett, Jermaine, Brees, and Ruckert, who improves the most and who disappoints the most?
I think. Well, Ruckert's expectations are getting kind of high, so maybe there's a chance he disappoints relative to that. But I think as long as you keep them realistic, he should be a successful second year guy. Because for me, I'm just thinking about him being, beating out Uzama for the second tight end, catching a few occasional passes, maybe a red zone touchdown or two, but mostly making impact through great blocking. So I think if your expectations are he's going to be a breakout fantasy star, I think you might be disappointed. But if you're just looking for a good, solid tight end too, I think he should be able to do that. But I think I think Jermaine has to be the guy who might disappoint because I don't know. I don't know if I'm so high on him making that pass rushing leap. He definitely is capable of it, 100%. But he already was an older guy coming out who had the low pass rush win rate and questions with his pass rush technique and things like that. And then in his rookie year, you know, he's a great playmaker against the run. And then against the pass, he was a great hustle guy, finishing plays outside the pocket, getting cleanup plays and things like that, which is great. But I just think in terms of straight up one-on-one pass rushing, I'm not 100% sold that he's going to make that leap. He can, and if he does, I think he'll be really good because the ceiling is high with his length, his speed, his explosion, all the tools he has. But I just think technically, in terms of having a plan, having counters, things like that, there was a long way to go coming out, and I think there still was after the rookie year. So I think there is a chance that maybe he's just a good solid role player more so than superstar. So I guess that's what I would
Yeah,
go with.
that's probably Yeah, I mean, that's probably what I would go with as well. I guess the only thing I would say is I do think it's possible Brees gets off to a slow start. Obviously, coming off the ACL, Barkley
Right.
wasn't necessarily the same his first year back. And, you know, he just left. He was just on an absolute tear and then gets injured in that Broncos game. So I think some fans are expecting him to just pick up right where he left off. I think you're going to see a little bit more of a ramp up for Brees. We'll see exactly how much I mean, we'll get those reports in the next coming days too. Like, how much is Brees going to be able to do at the start of training camp? When are they trying to work him in? Does he play at all in the preseason? That type of stuff. So I think there's a chance that statistically Brees might disappoint, but then as the season goes on, I think you're going to see him get better. I do believe in Jermaine making that leap, but a lot of, he just with how deep this Jets defensive line is how much is he going to play? I think he's
Right.
already an above average run defender on the edge, and I think you're going to continue to see him make strides there. And if JFM, there's a question about this coming up, so I might as well ask it next. But if JFM and Clemens are playing inside a lot more, maybe that brings up more opportunities for JJ to get snaps on first down. Maybe as we'll see if they do the hockey subs like they did last year. But if JJ's in that first line of defense, I think he'll have a higher snap count and maybe he's getting more opportunities to rush the passer. I do believe in the progress he'll make, but I agree that I don't think he's ever going to be a 10 sack guy. But that doesn't mean he can't be a really solid player for this team and have some big moments.
Right.
Um, we'll see. But out of the two, I mean, I think McDonald is just more of the pass rusher. So and they have Huff as well. So I don't know how many third down pass rushing ops Jermaine Johnson's going to get. So that would be the only thing that's I think holding him back. From at Ellie Hecht, who is the biggest dark horse no one is talking about to make this roster? Well, we did have one of them on the podcast a few weeks ago, Trey Dean, undrafted free agent safety. I think I'm looking at receivers. I think one of those undrafted free agent receivers has a chance to make it over Mims. Whether it's Brownlee, we mentioned Cap earlier, maybe Gibson. How do you feel?
I agree. I think there are. I mean, compared to previous years, I don't think there's as high of a chance for undrafted free agents, which is a great thing, obviously, because the depth is a lot stronger. But I do think there's a chance one, maybe two. I don't say two feels like pushing it, but I do think there maybe could be one guy who gets in, specifically those spots you mentioned, receiver, and I think at safety, there's a door for Trey Dean, who we had on the podcast, of course, but it's not
Maybe
just
he
biased
plays.
because of that. It's because of he really is one of the most out of the undrafted free agents they signed. He does have one of the best track records, and his draft process was kind of hurt by injuries, so he didn't get a chance to shine at the combine the way that most guys do. So I think Dean and then one of the receivers you mentioned are probably the best candidates for this option. I'm trying to think if there's a. Oh, actually, I do have one. I was going to say I was trying to think of a veteran player who might be able to fit that bill. I think Nick Bawden is a guy who could
Hmm.
sneak in here and shake things up. I don't have him making the roster in my 53 prediction that we get into later, so I don't think it will happen. But I think there's a chance. He was a fixture at the end of 21. It seemed like he was on track to make it last year before he got hurt. So the only thing is that they didn't really replace his role when he got hurt. They didn't, they basically didn't use the fullback position last
Right.
year. So it's like, do they really have, a spot for that in the offense? But if I had to pick someone to keep in mind, I guess I would pick him as a veteran who might be a surprise to make it.
We'll get to the 53 mans at the end of the podcast, but another one just to throw it out here because I think both you and I only have him keeping 3 tight ends. I could see him keeping 4, and I could see Kenny Yeboah sneaking onto this roster. I think people kind of forget
Yeah.
about him because they drafted Zach Kuntz. He's the exciting physical freak, so people want him to make the roster. But Yeboah made some strides last year, contributed a lot on special teams. I don't
Yeah.
know. He's just one of those guys that I could see having a good training camp, and then ultimately the Jets keep 4. Every 53 man roster, there's big surprises and cuts that we're upset about. But these guys, I mean, I guess we'll get to see a lot more given it's Hard Knocks. Maybe we'll have a better appreciation because every year it's like, well, okay, well, the coaches are in the building every single day. They know these guys better. They see every single rep in practice. We won't get exactly that access, but with Hard Knocks, we'll have maybe a better sense of who's performing in training camp. Like, last year they completely hid their love for Tony Adams. It'll be a lot harder to do that this year.
Right.
Um,
I mean, Yeboah was a good pick because he played a lot on special teams last year when he was
yeah.
out there. So, and special teams is always underrated in terms of making roster predictions. It's something
If
that you just talked about the coaches knowing more than we do. I think that applies to special teams more than anything. So
Yeah.
he's another good pick for that.
Yeah, and if Kuntz can, I think that's really Kuntz's only path to making the roster is if he can really show out on special teams. Because I do think
Yeah,
you're
I
right. I think
agree.
there
I
is
think
room for that
that's
fourth.
probably their hope is more so that, at least for right now, they're probably more so hoping like, okay, this huge athletic monster could be a good blocker and coverage guy in special teams. Like the rest of it, maybe later if he can just make the team. But right now, I think they're more so hoping, can he use those just pure athletic traits to be good on special teams?
All right, for Matt, Cody, Coyote, and Jay, how do you think the team will use JJ and McDonald? Will they be used at the same time on third down, or more Huff and 99 on thirds and JJ first two downs? I'll hang up and listen. I mean, kind of very similar to what we were just talking about. I think we had Joe Blewett on the podcast last week, and we were talking about the hockey subs that they did last year, where they had like the A team, and then the B team would come in with Solomon Thomas and Nathan Shepard, but because the Jets' defensive line is so built around individual strengths, meaning Al Woods is clearly a run interior defensive lineman, and a guy like Quentin Jefferson is very clearly a pass interior defensive lineman. It makes it a little harder to do that, but I think in terms of their edge usage, I think we will get plenty of reps with McDonald and Huff on the field at the same time. Although I not as much because I think they're still going to feed Lawson plenty of third down reps, and I think they want to keep those guys fresh. On straight pass rushing, want speed on the field. 4th and 15, game on the line. That's where you're going to see McDonald and Huff. I think JJ gets a lot more reps on first down, though. Kind of what I was saying. Like he will have more opportunities to rush the passer because I think he's going to be out there on plenty of teams throw the ball on first down. He'll have those opportunities, but he is out of all their edge rushers, probably their best run defender. When you say if we're considering JFM as more of
Yeah,
an interior guy, he's probably their best run defending edge. So he's going to be out there on first
right.
down a lot. I don't see McDonald out there on first down a ton. I think him and Huff are probably pretty much saved for passing situations. What do you say?
Yeah, this goes back to the last question too, and what you said about what could potentially hinder JJ this year is the fact that there really isn't much room for him to get more third down reps. And, those are the best reps to evaluate pass rushing because it's, just straight up, the opponent's going to pass. They know that they're going to pass and that you're coming. So it's just mano y mano. And JJ didn't get a lot of that last year. And it's kind of hard to see how he's going to get it this year because they're bringing back the same group, and the only addition they made is another guy who's gonna be who projects as a pass centric speed rusher in pass situations. So where are those snaps coming from for JJ to get more on third down? I think I totally agree with what you said. I think early down we will see more of him. So more total snaps, more total opportunities, which should help him progress and hopefully shine more this year. But the third down reps are going to be hard to come by because I think McDonald's definitely going to be getting most of his reps in those types of situations, and he's probably going to eat into Lawson snaps in those situations a little bit because last year it was Lawson was getting all of those reps. It was pretty much Lawson, Huff, JFM, and Q was the standard third down, obvious passing situation package all the time. They pretty much didn't deviate from that. But this year I could see McDonald eating into Lawson a little bit, maybe even Huff, just to keep a rotation going. But maybe they mix JJ in a little bit, but it's just hard to see him getting those reps. So I think his increase will come on the early downs because JFM potentially playing more on the inside. Clemens, he could also maybe kick inside more often. That's where I think some early down reps are going to open up for JJ to take. But third down, it's hard to see where he's going to get those snaps.
Yeah, and just kind of continue with the defensive line from Matt way out there, 18. Do you think that JFM might be their Rankins replacement, not Wood/Jefferson with JJ as the other end? Wouldn't this be the best four on first down to prepare for pass or run plays? To me, this seems like a no-brainer. I agree. I definitely think you get a lot, kind of just piggybacking off what we've been saying. I do think you get a lot more JFM and Clemens inside. I'm really excited to see Clemens this year in more of that three-tech role. I think you could make the argument, well, I was about. You know what? I think you can make the argument that Clemens had a more impressive rookie year than Jermaine Johnson, but
That's
I don't
fair.
know.
I think
I
there's a
mean,
claim for it. I think there's a claim that could be made.
similar plays. Maybe Clemens had more of the splash plays, and maybe his Johnson's a first round pick, so what you're expecting might be a little bit
Different
higher. Right,
expectations, yeah.
exactly. But I'm really excited to see Clemens this year. Like, I do think there's a real opportunity for him to make a lot of noise and, really come in as a third down interior defensive lineman, because I do think you're going to get a lot more JFM reps on first down inside. So if JFM's getting more reps on the inside on first down, and you can't use him every third down, even though he's one of their best pass rushers, especially from the inside, I think that's where Clemens really has a role, just kind of shadowing JFM. But yeah, I don't know. Do you think that JFM is going to come? Well, I mean, we'll learn on Thursday. I think that's their first practice. Where's JFM lining up? Is he still getting, I think he still will get obviously some reps on the outside as an edge. In definite run situations, he'll be out there. But most first downs, it wouldn't surprise me if he's inside lined up next to Q. That's just so hard for any interior offensive line to have to block both him and Q with these guys that the Jets have coming off the edge. I think that's part of the reason I'm not as concerned about the defense, even with some of the holes that they have, just because I feel like this defensive line is so talented and so deep that no matter what, if Saleh can get pressure on the quarterback, this defense is going to be all right. They might give up some plays, they might give up some yards, but they'll hold in the red zone and they'll get after the quarterback and make some plays. So even if they suffer some injuries and maybe the back end doesn't hold up as well as it did last year, this defensive line is too good for this defense not to be average or better. And I anticipate them being a lot better than that. So, yeah, I think JFM is – I think their Rankins replacement is more of a JFM Clemens, more so than just a direct Al Woods or Quentin Jefferson. What do you think?
Yeah, before I answer that quickly, I want to bounce off something you just said in terms of how you said the pass rush can help the Jets hold up and make stops in the red zone and be able to survive off of maybe they'll allow some big plays, get run on a little bit, but the pass rush can always bail them out in the big spots. I totally agree with that, and I just want to add that I think one specific area where I felt like they were really good last year is not the red zone, but the 20-yard zone in front of that. That 40 to 20-yard range, like the edge of field goal range. I feel like that's where they came up big so much last year. Like, especially both Patriots games, I feel like there were so many big sacks they got in that area of the field where it's like, okay, maybe they've given up a drive to this point, but they're stopping them just in time and getting those big loss plays on sacks to
pin Zach Wilson inside the 10.
And then pin Zach Wilson inside the 10. So you'd like to, those yards still matter. You'd like to get more 3-and-outs and, flip the field position, but it still matters a lot on the scoreboard to keep the points off the board. And, maybe you made some mistakes, but still don't give up points. I think that's because every defense is going to give up yards at some point. So it's, can you avoid letting the bad drives turn into 7? Can you hold it to 3? And then what I think they did really well is turn 3 into 0 with sacks in that, borderline range there, a field goal range. So yeah, I totally agree. I think the pass rush is going to keep this defense afloat despite other issues it might have. But in terms of JFM and Clemens, I mean, that's one of the things I'm most intrigued about in training camp is seeing how that deployment shakes out. Because
you going on any practices?
None in New York this year or New Jersey, but I will be going to the joint practice with the Panthers in a couple of weeks. They're coming down here. I'm looking forward to that. Gonna hopefully get credentials for that and check out Aaron Rodgers for the first time in a Jets uniform. So that should be pretty cool.
What date is that?
August 9th, I believe.
All right, maybe you just set up a booth. We do a podcast from there.
Yeah, we could do a live show from there. But yeah, I think that's the way that they deploy JFM and Clemens is. I'm going to say it's my most intriguing thing about training camp.
Yeah, right.
On the team. So I'm not going to be that nerdy, but top 10 most intriguing things that I'll be looking at, because compared to last year, it's such a big change because there just wasn't a ton of that type of positional rotation last year. JFM was pretty much the only guy who did it, who would rotate between inside and outside. Clemens did a little bit, but with him bulking up this year, now we could see a lot more of that. And then JFM could be doing even more because of Rankins being gone and defensive tackle being weak. Now you've McDonald's coming in who's going to demand more edge snaps. So Uh, it's an interesting wild card. It's hard to project how the D line's going to look without knowing what the plans are for those two guys. So that's why I'm excited to see how it's actually going to pan out with them.
All right, let's fly through these last ones and get to the 53-man roster. From at Mikey0516, any camp battles that will result in a trade? We were talking about this beforehand. I think there's two, I guess. The two that I guess were floating around last year, but it would be Bryce Hall and Denzel Mims are the two guys that I could see getting traded. I'll see if you have anybody else, but with Bryce Hall, I guess it comes down to him versus JBC. If JBC has a nice camp, I could see the Jets cutting Hall, especially if they bring back Quan, which I'll get into a little bit later, because it's, with Amos and Adams and Whitehead, and I guess Davis played a lot of special teams. Hardy's a special teamer. I mean, they lose some bodies in that DB room, and I think I do think Bryce Hall certainly has a chance to make this roster. Has plenty of starting experience, but does seem to have fallen out of favor a bit with his coaching staff. I mean, we'll see. But if JBC, who's another big bodied corner, plays well in training camp and Bryce Hall maybe struggles again, or even if not, there just might not be space for him. I could see them, if Joe Douglas can get a 6th-round pick for Blake Cashman, I could see him getting something for Bryce Hall. So Hall would be the one, and then Mims, I guess, would be the other one, although I don't anticipate him getting traded at this point. I think he's either cut or makes the team. What about you?
I agree with those. I think those are probably the top two. I was going to say maybe Huff. Not that I agree with it at all, but just throw it in there as they drafted McDonald. They want to get JJ more snaps. I don't know. Just maybe an edge rusher out there gets hurt. Like the Jets with Carl Lawson a couple years ago. Then they trade for Shaq Lawson.
What's the lowest you would take for Huff? Somebody called and offered a third.
I don't want to sound like I'm overvaluing him because we watch the Jets. And we're going to overvalue a guy who plays 20% of the snaps and maybe most people never heard of, but he was just so efficient last year as a pass rusher that the upside it's sky high. And I just really don't want to get rid of that player before I can see definitively who can this guy be if we give him a chance to really unleash himself. So would I be happy if they traded Huff for a 4th-round pick?
No.
I can't say I would be. Like
a third
round?
Depending on who it's from.
Yeah, depending on the team. I guess I can see that. Because, maybe he never can play the run. Maybe he plays more snaps and he is just, good
maybe,
or average.
Maybe McDonald is going off in training camp. But
then maybe McDonald is the guy. So 3rd round, I guess, is justifiable. Less than that, I'm there's too much upside in too important of a role. Edge pass rushing, which is about as premium as it gets.
Even if they trade him for a 3rd rounder, which is great value for signing an undrafted free agent, there still could be room for criticism in the sense that this is a win now team. We're going all in. We just talked about how,
and that's the biggest thing too. Yeah, we're trying to win now.
A lot of our confidence is coming from the depth and talent of this defensive line. And it's okay, sure. Even if JJ and McDonald are going off in training camp, and you trade Huff, all it takes is 1 injury, and then 2 injuries, and then 3, whatever. But it's if you're going all in and you have a guy like Huff who's as effective as he was in passing situations, it just kind of seems like, he's the type of guy that can seal up, a win or two for you. I mean, he did it last year against the Bills.
He's the guy who can make that Brandon Graham strip sack at the end of the Super Bowl to seal it up for you.
He's a big-time player.
Because
even if he
plays 10 reps, 15 reps the whole game, he's ready to go in the 4th quarter when you need that big play. Even if the tackle across from him isn't.
Yeah, even if he's only playing 20%, I do anticipate him to play a little bit more. He's still the type of guy who can make big plays, and that's really what it comes down to. So I agree.
In terms of it being win now, that's the thing about drafting McDonald and keeping Huff instead of trading him is, okay, long term, maybe could you allocate the resources a little bit better, build for the future, do all of that? Of course you can, but I think from a win now perspective, it's great to have all these problems in terms of this guy's not getting enough snaps, this guy's not getting enough snaps, because it means your team is just loaded with depth. So when you do face injuries, because they're going to happen, then you have talent that other teams can't fall back on in those situations. And for a win now team, that is really important as they try to make the most of this, hopefully 2 years, but this 1 year, you're as invested in winning this year as any other team in the league. So it's great to have that depth, even if it does have long-term questions in terms of, maybe some players should be getting more snaps or the position's too overloaded. The depth is very helpful for a win now team.
All right, from at Kid from Queens 3. Realistically, how scared should we be of this O line? At best, average and worst. You did that article. We did a podcast at this point, probably 2 months ago, where we did talk about the ceiling, the average, and the floor for this O line. You laid it out there. I mean, pretty much all variables exist, especially with the injury rash that we saw at tackles last year. If they get hit with something like that again, it could be trouble. I do worry about the tackles. You know, not to be revisionist, but we were all talking about, okay, they got to draft a tackle in round one. I'm glad that they didn't reach for a need. I do buy into the fact that they maybe weren't as in love with Broderick Jones. I think there could be some credence to that. But at the end of the day, it's like, all right, Dwayne Brown at left tackle, 40 years old. I do think, the saving grace for him is that, okay, he might not have it still as an amazing, he's better as a pass blocker than a run blocker, I guess is what I was trying to say. And that's really all I care about, because it's like the number one thing that can't happen to this season. I don't even have to say it, just knock on wood. You all know the answer to that. So if our left tackle has to give up a little bit of ground in the run game, but he's consistent and solid in pass protection, I can take that. He did play last year with the torn rotator cuff, so maybe he's a little bit better. But still, him and Becton as the two tackles are, I don't want to say concerning, just eyebrow raising, I guess is the best way to put it. And Becton with his injury issues, and we'll see how he adapts to right tackle. He looks like he's in phenomenal shape. He, at times, his rookie year looked like he was on the trajectory to being one of the best tackles in the NFL. There isn't really any reason he can't get back to that, but he is the type of guy that, okay, he's now playing right tackle. He did get beat kind of a lot in the last two training camps, more so in 2021. Granted, he was out of shape. We'll see what he looks like, but he's just a wild card. Interior of the offensive line, I feel pretty good about. Even with Lake and Tomlinson struggling last year, I do anticipate him being better this year. I don't really have a reason for that outside of, I just think that last year he was just so bad that I anticipate him balancing out a little bit more. I do think Tippmann next to him. I do like Tippmann a lot. I like the size that he brings to this offensive line. He seems pro ready at the very least. I think he'll be better than McGovern, and I think that'll help Lakin out a bit. So I don't know, the interior of this offensive line, and I don't have to say anything about AVT as long as he can stay healthy. The interior of this offensive line, I feel great about. I think they have great depth there as well. The tackles, wild cards, and they have some young guys backing him up. So if there are injuries, they also have Billy Turner. They have a little bit more bodies, and we won't have to see who are some of the guys we were throwing out there last year. Why can't I remember? Help me out. Who are some of the tackles? Yeah, so thank you. Cedric Ogbuehi, they threw out. I mean, they had George Fant last year. They had Connor McDermott.
Start a game? I don't think Remmers.
No, I think Remmers did towards the end of the year, but maybe not.
He did? Oh, my God.
I think he played at the end of the year. Whatever.
He did start a game last year.
Yeah, they were down to their, was it Seattle?
It was Miami the last game, so game didn't matter. But nevertheless, the fact that he was even on the roster, let alone starting, it's definitely the most polarizing unit on this team, and I think it's one of the most polarizing O-lines in the league because, you just look at it left to right, and the ceiling is legitimately very high because of the talent that these guys have, the ceilings that they've shown individually. AVT and Becton speaks for themselves, how good they, more specifically AVT because he's proven it a little bit more the past couple of years, but we know how great they can both be. Tomlinson has been a Pro Bowler, which is maybe a little bit overrating him, but he's still shown he could be a well above average guard. Tippmann is a second round pick, first center drafted in this class, who has great film at Wisconsin and looks like he could be a pro ready good center. And then Dwayne Brown is past his prime, but he could, if healthy, be an average tackle. So you put all that together, it can be a really good offensive line. But then the floor, considering all the injuries, the age of Brown, Tomlinson, the way he played last year, he was bad. So we hope he can bounce back, and I think he will. I agree with you because it was just such an outlier, and it was a mess around him. The quarterbacking did not help anybody up front. I think that affected him specifically because a lot of his issues were communication related. So I do think he will bounce back, but he was bad last year, so he has to prove it. So the floor is also pretty low, and I think most likely it settles somewhere in the middle, and they'll be about average, like you said. But I think it's fair to be a little scared of this offensive line because I think it has the most potential to hurt this team out of any unit on the roster. Because with Rodgers, I think there are two sides to it. On one hand, there's what you said, the fact that you can be less scared of what the offensive line will do to him because he is a veteran. He can handle it. He has the poise. I think he'll help the offensive line because he'll get the ball out quicker.
Set
He'll be better
protection.
at setting protections, calling things out pre-snap. There are a lot of ways he'll help the offensive line, but at the same time, if you analyze Rodgers' production over the years versus pressure compared to when he's kept clean, he actually does have a very strong lean to ranking higher in clean situations than pressured situations. And, obviously every quarterback is better when, they're kept clean versus pressured, but I'm talking about compared to the rest of the league, he's consistently either the best or second best in kept clean situations, but below average in pressure situations. So basically, pressure has hurt his production more so than most other quarterbacks. So there is that evidence there that pressure does have an effect on him
Right.
in a way that is, you do want to avoid. He's not the greatest under pressure quarterback, but when he's kept clean, he's absolutely dominant in a way that pretty much no one could touch. So there is that side of the coin as well. So I do think a good offensive line can be very beneficial in getting the absolute best out of Aaron Rodgers, especially the way he's kind of changed his game in recent years. He's been, especially the 3 years he played under Hackett, he really turned into less of a gunslinger and more of a get the ball out quick kind of guy,
Right.
which, should facilitate good offensive line play because you're getting the ball out quick, taking pressure off of them. But it's hard to play that style of football when quick pressure is coming, like the Jets were allowing last year. So I'm in the middle on it. I'm not deathly afraid of this offensive
Right.
line, but yes, it is the biggest concern that could hurt this team and prevent them from achieving their goals.
I think I asked you this on that last podcast where you talked about the offensive line, but are you more confident in them as run blocking or as a pass blocking unit?
I would say run blocking.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
that's because you look at the two guys you trust the most, or not trust the most, the two most talented guys, I would say, are AVT and Becton. And both of them, I think it's run blocking where they really shine the most. So I would say that. But it can be a good pass blocking offensive line. I mean, Becton and AVT have both shown the potential to be good pass blockers. I think Tippmann can be a very good pass blocker. And Brown, I think, is one guy who I trust more in the passing game at this point, the run game, because I just don't know if he has the tools at this point to be a really forceful run blocker. But I think technically, because of who he is, the experience and the accolades, success he's had, I think that technique could hold up a little bit better into his age, the latter stages of his career than the run blocking. So I think he can be a good pass blocking offensive line, but I do trust the run blocking more.
If Brown goes down, who do you see sliding in as the left tackle? Do they put Billy Turner out there because Rodgers trusts him? Do we swap? I mean, I guess it maybe depends
Yeah,
when
a
it
lot of
happens.
options, right? I mean, what do you think?
I think if it happens early in camp, if for some reason Brown's rotator, whatever, starts acting up,
Early in camp, probably Becton,
right,
right?
right, exactly. I think if it's any time before the season starts, it'll be Becton. During a game, I don't anticipate them sliding Becton over, so I think it would be probably Billy Turner just because Rodgers trusts him. But we'll see how Mitchell and Carter look um, in preseason. But I think, yeah, I guess even if he gets hurt in the middle of the season, the middle of the game, maybe they don't slide Becton over. But in between weeks, I think they. I guess it depends how he's playing. I was going to say I think you slide Becton back over to left tackle, but if
I mean,
it's
he
like,
does have experience of in-game switching
yeah,
from college,
I guess that's true. I
but
guess
that was a while ago, and you do want to, at some point, allow a guy to settle
right.
in.
That's what I was going to say. Is I was about to say that I think no matter what, Becton fulfills Dwayne Brown as a backup, no matter what. But then if it's week 6, week 7, Becton's had a good start to the season. He's stayed healthy. He's solidified himself on the right side. Maybe you don't mess with that, but at the same time, left tackle is more important than right tackle. And if you put Billy Turner out there and he's a turnstile, and then you try to put Max Mitchell out there and he's struggling, I mean, I don't know. I think it depends when it happens, but I would lean Becton. But if he gets settled in, I think they probably go Turner and see how it goes. And if it goes
I think
poorly, then make the swap.
two spots that have changed in the middle of a game or in the middle of the season, that could mess
AVT,
with the chemistry.
bring
Well, then
AVT
again,
back.
you're dealing with that same problem where it's like now there's a new left tackle and a new right guard.
Do you
I
think
don't
we
know.
get the AVT at tackle look this year? I'm gonna go.
I feel like they made enough investment into the tackles to where they hope that doesn't happen. They signed Billy Turner, Becton's back, and they drafted Carter Warren, who's probably last resort option. But um, there's just so many
If
variables
they
here that
have
come down
another,
to camp and preseason. We got to see how confident they are in each of these guys to know, like, do I want to play them or do I want to do the AVT thing again?
if the offensive line is struggling and they have a lot of injuries, I could definitely see it. I definitely think if it's like if Becton goes
Because
down and
even last
Brown
year
goes
was like
down,
such a last resort, right? Like, how many
yeah,
injuries did it take to get there? It was Becton, Brown,
Fant,
Fant, and
Mitchell.
was it just those three, or did Mitchell also push him over there? I think it was just the first three, right? Because it
Yes, it
was
was just the first three.
AVT at left tackle, Mitchell at right tackle, right? So it was
Yeah, and
just the
and
first
they were
three.
going to start Connor McDermott. That's what we were all expecting, and then AVT came out for the left tackle of the Steelers game. But I think, look, Aaron Rodgers is your whole season, so you have to protect him. So I'm not like concerned about the offensive line in the way that I was concerned about him last year because, like you said, they're obviously crucial to his success, but he'll get the ball out of his hands quickly. He'll be able to make the right. Like I think this offensive line will, no matter what, be about average. I think. I mean, it's possible they could be worse, but I think they'll be about average. But if the tackles go down, I'm moving AVT outside pretty fast. I would say I would trust AVT at left tackle before I'd trust Carter Warren out there as a rookie.
Right. But then do you trust
No,
AVT at left tackle and Schweitzer at right guard
yeah,
more than AVT at right guard and or Turner at
well,
left
because
tackle?
they got Tristan Colon and they have Connor McGovern and Schweitzer. So one of those guys, yeah, I'd rather have a hole on the interior than left tackle. I would say.
Right. That's fair.
I don't know. Let's just
I
hope we
just
don't
feel like
get
with
there.
AVT, I want to see him. Like, he did really well, but I feel like guard is his best position, and I just would like to see him be able to stay put and just really hone in on being a dominant guard. But if desperate times come again, you got to do what you got to do. And if you trust AVT more at left tackle than one of those other backups, then you got to do it.
All right, we have two more here from at Healy1 from Chris Healy. Did Robert Sala learn clock management in the offseason? Now I read this and I was like, I thought Sala was pretty good. The only major gaffe was the end of that Lions game. Because I mean, I think I'm trying to think of specific examples, but I felt like he managed the clock well down the stretch of the Steelers game. I feel like there was a number of times the Jets managed the end of the first half pretty well. Is there any specific gaffes? I mean, the Lions game was not good. His usage of the timeouts was not good. So I would imagine that's what this is in reference to. Any other
I mean, we
major?
are both trying to think of big mistakes, and maybe we're forgetting, but like we were searching through Twitter. I mean, I specifically searched Salah clock management, and pretty much everything I saw was in reaction to the Lions game, which that was bad. I think he should have called timeout earlier after that one play late in the fourth quarter and saved some time there. But other than that, I feel like he was pretty good for the most part. I mean, I looked at some metrics that kind of relate to clock management, and there was one that was actually an article I wrote that came up. I forgot about it, but in January, there's an article by, I think it was 538. They had an article that looked at every coaches and how many timeouts they wasted throughout the season based on like a study they did, which timeouts are considered wasted and when is the most valuable time to use them. And they found that timeouts are wasted when you use them to avoid the delay of game in the first, 3/4 of the game when it's not in doubt, or if you're, just using it to discuss a play or like, an operational timeout that's not really related to, clock management at the end of a half. So they found the criteria for what a wasted timeout is, and basically Salah had the second fewest wasted timeouts of any coach last year.
Do
So
we know
in that
where?
respect, he's pretty good. Yeah, what were you gonna
Do
say?
we know where Denver was?
I'll actually check that right
I
now.
would imagine
But
because I'll tie it into the next question, which was from at Bosif NY. Are you at all scared of Hackett repeating his Denver performance? Then he did put in parentheses. I know not entirely his fault. I did,
also, it was the Ringer, not
oh
538.
good.
But I'm gonna check that
Because
right
I
now.
keep seeing that clip of the Monday night game against Seattle where Peyton Manning's like, "All right, timeout. I'd call timeout here. All right, timeout." And they let the clock run all the way down. He elected to have McManus kick like a 60-yard field goal. Um, which, I think OC will play a part, but the Jets have solid managing timeouts, and then they also have their analytics guys or whatnot. But Hackett will have an influence on the
They're
clock
actually
management.
pretty good. They had
Oh,
15, which was tied for the
all right.
sixth fewest. So there you go.
So they were just bad in every other metric. How worried should we be about Hack? I think when the hire was initially made, there's a lot of negativity, but then it immediately turned to maybe the Jets will get Aaron Rodgers, and then that's all we focused on for the ensuing months.
Yeah.
And then we kind of are brushing off last year's Denver as performances. Look, he was very successful as an OC with Rodgers in Green Bay. Head coach is a lot different. You have to delegate a lot. Russell seemed to be a problem. There was plenty of times where you can go back and watch film and you see open receivers and Russell looking a lot like Zach Wilson and running around and not hitting him in time and within the rhythm of the offense. And so I think pretty safe to assume it won't get that bad as it did get with Denver. But I also think it's like we can't completely shrug it off. He was at the helm of the ship. I don't know. Do you buy into
Right.
the fact that they gave Russell a lot more control over the offense, and that's kind of what derailed the season, and that maybe just Russell and Hackett weren't a good match, that we've seen Hackett and Rodgers have success together, so we can kind of just look at Green Bay film and not really look. I haven't really watched too much Denver film since they've hired him. I've just been watching Green Bay stuff. So I don't know. Is that a mistake on our part?
I would say I'm 80% confident, 20% concerned, just because I know it's a completely different role, and I know he's back with Rodgers and a lot of other guys he's familiar with. But it was just such a disaster of epic proportions that it's hard to completely
It was Gase.
write off what happened. It was Gasian for sure. Even compared to some of Gase's head coach years, it kind of was more disastrous than that, just because of the talent.
They got to bring
at their
Gase.
disposal.
They got to bring Gase back just for the first drive of the game. Just have him.
Yeah, he's an opening drive specialist.
Yeah, you have coaches for everything, analytics.
It's like
and
if you made a
clock
movie
management.
and you had a director just for the opening scene.
Yeah.
That's what he is.
Hyperdrive. He had that stretch there. It was like 7 weeks
he
in a row.
comes in, he directs like that opening action set piece, and then as soon as that's over, they get him right out of there because he's going to ruin the story and the character development and all that. He just gives you that flashy start to the movie.
Yeah, exactly. If he has a whole week to prepare, he can't deal with counterpunchers well. That's all it is. He just wasn't an adjuster.
So I'd be all for that for sure.
We should start that movement.
Yeah, that would be a new role in the NFL, opening drive specialist. But yeah, I think it's fair to be minorly concerned because of, in terms of the whole head coaching part of it, obviously that doesn't apply to this in terms of managing the locker room because, there was a lot of drama there last year. That doesn't necessarily really matter because, he's the OC now. It's a totally different role. And, everything we've heard about him is that he's a really likable guy behind the scenes. I mean, Tim Boyle told us about it when we talked to him, that he's just, a fun guy. He relates with the players, communicates information really well. So it seems like he's in that OC role without the pressure of being the head guy on the team.
Seems like a lot of guys didn't like LaFleur from the sound of it.
Yeah, it does seem like there are some, maybe they didn't hate him, but we didn't hear the same, level of players praising LaFleur to the level we've heard it.
It sounds like Hackett just relates to the guys a lot better.
Yeah, it really seems like he has that camaraderie with the players. So yeah, I'm mostly confident that he's going to do well. This is the role that he did well in Green Bay. He has a very good camaraderie with Rodgers, both off the field in terms of on the field, what his scheme and what his changes did for Rodgers. And I think it's fair to be a little concerned that, even in Hackett's Green Bay tenure, he wasn't totally in charge of the offense because, it was Matt LaFleur who was mostly running that. But Hackett did have a big level of involvement in it, especially in the red zone, which is where Rodgers was really, really effective throughout those 3 years. So I'm mostly confident he's going to do well. But at the same time, I think, we can't totally forget about Denver last year because even beyond the, overall locker room stuff, just what happened on the field, schematically, the production of the offense was a total discombobulated mess, and you can't totally ignore that. So we'll see what happens, but I'm I have a high level of confidence. At the same time, don't forget about last year.
All right, let's get into our 53-man roster predictions. Michael, these are inevitably going to be wrong, but we'll see who can be closer. I think we have a few differences, but mostly pretty in line. I don't think any of us really took any big. Well, we'll see. Quarterback, one difference right off the bat. I have them just keeping two, Rodgers and Zach. Although that's not to say that Tim Boyle won't be in the building. I think you have them keeping Boyle on the active roster. There's the
Yeah.
whole 3 QB rule. I could definitely see it because it basically allows if you carry the way I understand the rule is basically if you carry three quarterbacks, you get an extra player active on game days, 5 instead of 6, because the quarterback doesn't count as one of those active guys. So I think there's definitely room for Boyle to avoid that disaster scenario of Rodgers going down in game and then either Zach is struggling or Zach goes down and then it's like, all right, Mecole Hardman, get out there and play QB. Like they can avoid that situation, but I think at least at the beginning of the season, I think it makes sense that they could stick Tim Boyle on the practice squad. He'll be in the building, and then if anything is happening throughout the season and the injuries, whatever, they can elevate him. That's just at least my prediction. What was your thought process to giving Boyle the roster spot?
Yeah,
Just
I could
sell
totally see
out?
that. I'm not. Yeah, I'm just selling out because he's on the podcast. That's 100% it.
I'm on the Tim Boyle
Yeah,
train though.
that's it.
I should be very clear that I'm anticipating a great preseason from Tim Boyle just because he couldn't have been any nicer and was clearly a really smart guy. So I think I'm not. This isn't Tim Boyle slander. It's just roster gymnastics. That's all.
No, but I think for me, I just because Zach Wilson is so, you know, not settled in, and maybe this could change by the time the roster decisions are made if Wilson has a great preseason. But as of right now, I feel like there's just not enough security with him in that second spot to where they'll want Boyle in that third spot just in case, just in case. I think this third quarterback rule is going to have a lot of teams testing the waters with it this year because they saw what went down that NFC Championship. I think a lot of teams are going to, coming off of that, are going to be a little more afraid and want to take advantage of this rule. Maybe it dies down a little bit starting in future years as they realize, okay, we don't necessarily need to use a roster spot on that. But I don't know. I see it just because of the lack of total faith in Wilson as the backup. Just having another guy there in case, if disaster strikes, you don't have to put it all on Zach Wilson. There is another option available.
All right. I get the argument for it. I just feel like that they can slide Tim Boyle onto the roster through the practice squad. Just the same. But I agree with you. The question with Zach Wilson as the backup could definitely leave the door open for Boyle to just make the 53 off the bat. I also think that he's one of those guys who could maybe be initially cut and then brought back with having to do roster gymnastics and guys who get hurt during camp and putting him on IR or whatever. I just think he's a guy that will be in the building in the fall, so they can take advantage of that and see if they have to put him on a practice squad or do what. But just initial 53-man roster, this is what I'm going with. Running back, we're the same. Hall, Carter, Izzy, and Knight. The only surprise, is there a chance that Brees and Izzy are safe. I think they'll go with 4 because of Brees's injury, but is there a chance they go 3 and maybe they cut Carter and Knight?
I think it's a pretty low chance. I mean, you think if Bawden were to make the team, it would maybe affect them here, or is that more tight end? You think that affects?
I think it's more tight end, but
yeah, I think it's pretty unlikely that any of these 4 guys miss the team, honestly.
Yeah. No, I think we have it right. I think they'll keep 4. Maybe I was gonna say maybe there's a surprise. Somebody could sneak onto the roster, but I think these 4 are pretty set. Receiver, we're the same here, I believe. Let me double check, but obviously Garrett.
Actually, no.
Oh, all right. So
here.
mine: Garrett Wilson, Corey Davis, Allen Lazard, Mecole Hardman, Randall Cobb, and Denzel Mims. I have Mims making it. I'm gonna guess you don't.
I don't.
Wow. I mean, I shouldn't act too shocked. What's your thought process behind Mims?
I mean, maybe bold in the sense that keeping 5 receivers is a little bit light, but just the way that they talked about Mims so far this offseason makes it seem like he's almost in the same boat as the undrafted free agents. Salah said that he's going to have a chance to make this roster. So that makes it seem like he's going to have to earn it. And the way that his previous off seasons have gone, I don't think he's going to earn it. So the only thing here is that I feel like 5 receivers is admittedly a little bit light. So maybe one of the undrafted guys beats him out and makes it as the 6th guy, and one of my other players on here doesn't make it. But
Well, if you
for
go
right now,
if
I'm
you,
going to go with
if
5.
you're going 4 running backs or even 4 tight ends, I mean 5 receivers isn't completely out of the norm, especially to start because you can
Right.
litter your practice squad with them. I have him keeping Mims. I think he'll have a good training camp. I don't know why. Maybe I just need to let go of my Mims love. I've never been one of those guys that I mean, maybe I shouldn't say never, but it's not like as of the last 2 years I've been one of those guys who thinks Mims is going to be a world beater or anything. I just think that he has a lot of talent. He fits a specific profile that this team, has in Alan Lazard. He fits the type of guy that I think has succeeded with Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers has gotten the best out of those athletic, tall, jump ball receivers. He's young, has the athletic profile. He seems in shape. He's been in the facility for 3 years now. This is his 4th year. A new system might be what's needed because, we saw a lot of promise with him under Gase. I would say we were all pretty high on him. And then under LaFleur, the last 2 years, he's really struggled. The big thing with Mims is the mental miscues because no matter who the offensive coordinator is, yes, you could maybe say I've seen the complaint that LaFleur's system may have been very complex. And certainly there's been a lot more dialogue. We'll get a better view on it in Hard Knocks in the offensive meeting. So maybe that'll help to understanding where he's supposed to be lining up and what he's going on. But a lot of mental miscues last year from him. So that's really the biggest thing that's holding him back is him. But otherwise, I think you're going to see a route tree that's better suited for his style of play. I think you're going to have stuff drawn up for Lazard that if Lazard were to go down, you could try to plug Mims in. Not to say that he's the same player as him, but if they need a big bodied jump ball guy, I mean, he is really the only other guy, unless you think Corey Davis is doing that. So I have Mims making it. I just think he's talented and Rodgers can get the best out of a guy like that. But it would not surprise me if Brownlee or Cap, or even if he just gets cut, wouldn't be a huge shocker. At tight end, I have him just keeping 3 in Conklin, Uzama, and Ruckert. Although, again, I could definitely see them going 4 here with either Kuntz or why am I speaking? Yaboa, jeez. It's getting late. I think we're the same there. We are. If you have anything to say on tight end, you can chime in. But otherwise, you can go to the offensive line. Holding. All right, cool.
Nope.
Offensive line, tackles. I think we might be the same all the way through. Let me check, but I'll go through my left tackle. I have listed Dwayne Brown, and then I have Carter Warren behind him.
Yeah, we're the same.
Oh, actually, I think we have one difference. Interior offensive line. Because, the tackles we have Becton, Brown, Billy Turner, Carter Warren, and Max Mitchell. Tackles are pretty set for us. We are keeping 5. I think that makes sense. The interior, Lakin, Tipman, AVT, that makes sense. Then the backup interior. I think you have 3 guys here in McGovern, Cologne, and Wes Schweitzer. You could keep all 3 of them. But with Billy Turner being there, and him having inside flexibility, I think they're only going to keep 2 here. And I'm going to say that Wes Schweitzer is going to get cut. Even though I think he has the biggest contract out of the 3 of them, I just think I've watched all 3 of these guys. I'm not an offensive line expert, but I know Joe Blewett agrees with me. I like Cologne more than Schweitzer. I think McGovern has, experience here, and I'm more comfortable with him coming in as a center. Michael, what was your take on this?
Yeah, I also have only 2 making it, but I have Schweitzer instead of Cologne. And I actually agree with you. I was more impressed with Cologne than Schweitzer. But just because of the contract, I mean, they did give Schweitzer $3.2 million guaranteed. So for a backup guy, that is pretty notable. And I don't, maybe they try to sneak him on the practice squad, whatever. But I just feel like with that price tag, he's gonna make it. This is our prediction, not what I would do, because I do like Cologne better. I think he's pretty underrated compared to how much he's played and what his contract is. But I think Schweitzer's going to be there. McGovern, I don't think you could say McGovern's a lock because of his contract, because he got a really small contract compared to what I was expecting. I mean, I thought he was going to go start for someone and get a nice deal, but I think it's a 1 year, $1 million deal. I think that he got. So
he may have taken less to stay home and
1.9, 1.3 guaranteed. So that's a contract that I don't think makes him a lock, but it feels like he is because he's been here. He's experienced in the scheme, and think he is like an average center at
Is
least. So
is there anybody on this
yeah,
offensive line you think that they could cut and try to sneak onto the practice squad, like a Cologne or a Schweitzer? I think you could cut Schweitzer
I
and
think
sneak him on.
Cologne's a candidate for that. I think they could get him on there.
I think the same with Schweitzer. I don't think either of them. I mean, maybe Schweitzer gets claimed. I don't know. It does seem like Schweitzer's the bigger name, but I trust the Ravens offensive lineman more, and
Right.
just from
Which
watching
is
him,
not a bad strategy at all.
yeah. Unless he's Alex Lewis. All right, let's do. I think we have the same defensive lineman. We both have him keeping 10. At edge, Lawson, Jermaine Johnson, McDonald, Huff. I put Clemens there as well, even though he's more of a three tech. At defensive tackle, I listed JFM there, Quinnen, Al Woods, Quentin Jefferson, and then here's the only one I think is really up for debate: Solomon Thomas. There's a chance he doesn't make it, especially if Clemens and JFM are playing a lot more inside. The question is there a chance they go with 9 defensive linemen, cut Thomas, or is there a chance that somebody can usurp Thomas either at edge if Clemens and JFM are playing inside or in the interior? Is there anybody that comes to mind that they could maybe jump Solomon Thomas, Isaiah Mack, Tanzel Smart?
I think Smart could, but I do have Thomas making it. I have the same defensive line as you. Again, this is just like Schweitzer, not a guy who I'm putting him on here because I want him to be on the team. Or I don't mean it that way. I do mean it that way. I want to win games. I don't. He wouldn't be on my 53-man roster, but it seems like they have taken a liking to him for some reason,
Well, he's been there
and
he's been under Saleh for his whole career, so
gotten like 2 good plays throughout those years. So, yeah, I mean, I think he'll be on there. But this comes back to what we said earlier about JFM and Clemens and seeing what their usage is like as much as we can in training camp and preseason. Because if Clemens does make a full inside switch, which which I don't think he will. I think we'll still see some of him on the edge because he's still he's still at a size where it's not completely ideal to play him inside all the time. So maybe that doesn't happen, but say he does, or say he plays inside most of the time, or JFM plays inside, a lot more than he was. Between those two guys, I think, they could take enough snaps on the interior to where maybe you do feel comfortable cutting Thomas. So it comes down to what they do with Clemens and JFM, I think. But for now, I think Thomas is going to be there.
all right. At linebacker, we both have him keeping 5, although here's the big difference. Mosley, Williams, Sherwood, and Barnes, all equal. We both have those 4. You have them keeping Hams and Nasruddin. I have them
Yeah.
bringing back Quan. I think they bring back Quan. I don't know if maybe you didn't consider that. Maybe you didn't know he was on the table, but I have them signing Quan, and that's the 5 linebackers they're going with. Hamza, they try to sneak onto the practice squad. That's just how I see it. What was your thought process? Are you high on Hamza? Speaking of guys we've barely seen, he only plays on special teams, really, and preseason, I guess.
Yeah. I'm not necessarily high on him. I just think with the way my roster is shaking out, I think another linebacker in the mix made sense because you look behind Mosley Williams and, Barnes is a red shirt. I don't think you consider him a candidate to really play defensive snaps this year. Maybe a lot on special teams, but not defensively. And then you have Sherwood, which, maybe they're confident in him. Maybe they still want to see him earn it. We don't know. But I don't want to just fully hand it to him. So I figured keep Hamza for more competition.
I'll be there in training camp.
More security, let's say that, instead of competition. But in terms of Quan, I mean, like I said earlier, I'm on the fence. I could absolutely see him coming back. I could see him not coming back, maybe finding better opportunity elsewhere. For the sake of this, I lean towards, that latter possibility that he does not come back. But if he does, I mean, do you think that they cut both those guys and go with 4 linebackers? Or do you think
No, Sherwood's
then
making
it
the
would
team.
be 5 and
Sherwood's
stays?
definitely
Yeah.
making the team. I don't see any way Sherwood doesn't make the team.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
But
It'd probably be 5. Sure, Nasruddin
it's really
cut, maybe practice
really what it
squad
comes
and,
down to is linebackers and tight ends. I feel like are the main special teams positions. Some of the obviously safety and the Jets of Hardy and there's other special teamers. But I feel like you want to have good special teams. You want to have good tight ends and linebacker depth.
tight ends. A thing that people don't really realize about them on special teams is the kick return blocking.
Yeah,
The tight ends are usually the guys who throw like the key first level blocks
And I don't mean
on
to
the
say
kick
anything.
return units.
And I don't mean to say anything. Both of us, I think, might be having a misstep here because we have him keeping 4 running backs and 3 tight ends. But there's room for that. Either it's Bowden, either it's Kuntz or Yeboah. There's that last kind of offensive blocker, special teams type of player. I don't know if Kuntz
Yeah.
really fits the blocking role, but but on special teams though, why not? So I could see them maybe going with one less receiver in my case, cutting Mims and keeping a Yeboah or
Yeah, I could
Bowden,
take out a linebacker for that.
or maybe they cut a running back, or who knows. But it is interesting to note that it's like tight end and linebacker depth is really what you want to look at, and it's like I guess they could put Ruckert out there, but kind of seems like Conklin, Uzama, Ruckert. Maybe you play Uzama on special teams a little bit more. I don't know. But I definitely think a 4th tight end, after looking at it, makes a lot more sense. Corner, we're also pretty similar, except actually we do have one difference here. Both have Sauce, Reed, MC2, Eccles, JBC, and Hardy. But you have Guidry, and both of us don't have Bryce Hall. Interesting to note there.
Yeah,
We
I
both think
mean,
Hall gets
so you
traded.
don't have Guidry, right? You don't have Guidry?
I don't have Guidry. I think they put him on the practice squad. And I have
Okay.
JBC having a good camp and Hall getting traded or cut, which was my bold prediction, but I could definitely see him making it. I was just trying to be different.
I mean, I think me putting Guidry on is a little bold because, I mean, I liked him when he was on the Jets. I thought he was a solid player, but
Sick
he didn't
name.
really catch on. A great name for sure, and he didn't really catch on. After that, he played a few games with the Raiders last year, but that's it. So that shows you that maybe he was, kind of a guy who just got snaps because he was on the worst team in the NFL over those 2 years. But I don't know. He has speed, which is very elite speed, which is very valuable on special teams. And just looking at the corner depth chart, I feel like they need slot depth there because Eccles can kind of do it, but he's more of an outside guy. That's where he's at his best. So he's your primary outside backup. And I think you could use some more slot depth in there. And I think Guidry gives you that, whereas Hall wouldn't. So that's kind of my logic. But Hall is definitely a roster worthy talent. I mean, I think he would start for some teams. So maybe in this scenario
Some
he
bad
gets
teams.
traded.
I think he gets traded.
Yes, bad teams. What I mean, like he's probably a low end starter.
I think they trade him for
A
like a
starter
6.
nonetheless.
Yeah, I think
So
they trade him for a
yeah,
6.
I could see that.
But yeah, I agree. I mean, I think I kind of like how Joe Blewett said last week. He used to be very overrated by Jets fans, and now he's underrated. He's certainly, in terms of cornerback depth, among the best in the league. So maybe there's a thought to keep him there. I just think with JBC and Eccles and the fact that I think he is a player you can flip for a day 3 pick, maybe even a 5th, who knows? I think he probably has some fans around the league, and we'll see. Maybe if he has a good training camp, hard knock star. I have a sense that I think he'll get traded, but who knows? And then at safety, I think we're all the same here with Whitehead, Amos, Adams, and Davis. Ashton Davis, we'll see. Maybe he does something this year on defense, but he's solidified himself as a pretty good special teams player. So, as far as 3rd round picks go, right now he's the best player from that class, right? I mean,
I
Becton
think
has a good
so.
chance to pass him, but
Oh my goodness, what a terrifying thought.
Becton has a very good chance to pass him if he's just competent this year. But I think as it stands, Davis is their most successful player. It's a bad class.
Just because of the interception against Cleveland?
And the special teams acumen. He's made some good special teams play. Didn't he
That's true.
force a fumble or something?
I mean,
Was
does
he
Braden
recover a
Mann,
fumble?
or not Braden Mann, but does Bryce Hall get the edge just because he started for one season?
All right,
He
well,
started more games than Becton did.
okay, that's true. I guess that's true. If they can flip Bryce Hall for the pick that they took him with, that was, yeah, geez, what
At
a
least
bad
he's
pick.
at net zero.
Yeah, all right. Well, you know what? Let's hope Becton stays healthy and has a good season, because otherwise that draft class is. And hey, I'm holding on to my Mims hope. Special teams is the same for us, Zerline, Morstead, and Hennessy, but I did have one question for you. Starting kick returner and punt returner on the spot, who is it? Hardman?
Hardman.
For both?
Yeah.
Who's the other guy that's back deep with him?
I mean, did Hardman do kickoffs? I'm looking it up right now to make sure. I feel like he's more of a kickoff guy, but I'm not 100% sure if he did that over there.
Seems like Cobb is the guy you stick back there with him, even if he's a little slower.
He did kickoffs as a rookie, then he did less of it. He did mostly punt returns. Hardman did.
Yeah. But
he might do both. I mean, maybe Bam was a good kickoff guy in college. Maybe he's in there,
Is
but
he?
that's a good option as well. They do have some good candidates in here. Maybe it's an open competition.
I think Hardman is the plan, especially for punt returning. But kickoffs, you generally send two guys back there, and I think it'll be Hardman and
I feel like that's more of
Bam.
a running back thing.
Yeah, maybe Hardman and
The
Bam.
kickoffs.
Well,
I think Hardman will do punts. Running back, I think we'll see, or not running back, kickoff return. I think we'll see a few different guys get chances to win that.
maybe Banakanda. Yeah, that makes sense.
That feels like a good role for him, just because like the home run speed. Like I feel like punts, you need more short area quickness, and then kickoffs is more. Can you get up and
You
go?
can always stick Cobb back
speed.
there, even if he may have lost a lot of the speed in terms of kick returning. He's got the football IQ, the acumen. He can take those weird plays.
Vision's important there too. Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe that was Ty Montgomery, that Green Bay play where the ball kind of bounces right by the outs, right where we
I remember that exact play. I forget who.
I think it was Montgomery. I think maybe Cobb did it too. I don't know, but he's got the high IQ. I could see him back there with somebody else, telling him to take it out or not. But
on the spot, I'm going to say Hardman does both.
I'm going to say Hardman does both.
Prediction right now, but I also don't think that's going to happen.
Okay. Real strong prediction there. All right. Well, I guess we can wrap up there.
I just don't know who to say, like, if it's not Hardman. So I feel like
Abanikanda.
It's safer to say he'll do both than
go with
pick
Izzy.
one guy.
Izzy.
I would take how about Hardman punt? The field will do the kickoff returns.
Okay. Tim Boyle.
Very specific.
Yeah. All right. You can follow us at CYJ Pod on Twitter.
Zach Kuntz.
Michael _Nania, myself, Ben W. Blessington.
Also, it was Ty Montgomery. I just looked it up.
Go to JetsXFactor.com. Best place to go for Jets content. Rate, review, subscribe on iTunes. Subscribe to the Jets X Factor YouTube. Is he still in the league?
Ty Montgomery? So, right?
Where did he go after Gase?
He's on the Ravens, right?
I think so.
No, he's on the Ravens before the Jets. 2 years to the Saints. He played one game for the Pats last year.
Oh, okay. And he had. Oh, I thought it said he had -2 yards. I guess receiving he had -2 yards.
Yeah, he had -2 rushing yards.
-2 rushing yards. He did have a TD though, so there's that. I think that'll do it for us, Michael. Last thoughts. Finally, we're here at training camp. We'll be a little bit more consistent with our schedule now that we have actual stuff to talk about. We're going to do. I haven't checked this with Michael, but I think we should do a podcast after each Hard Knocks episode. Do you like that? You like that idea?
We could do that, but we're known to overpromise, so
well,
we'll see what happens.
Okay, we'll figure out the schedule. We'll get it down during training camp. But thank you everybody for listening, staying with us. Really appreciate. Everybody have a great week. We have actual football to watch. The elite practice clips. We'll have Hard Knocks next week. The Jets play a game. Before you know it, maybe we'll see a uniform reveal. A lot of exciting stuff. The Jets finally back in your lives. Very excited about this season. It all starts this week.
We got our Bills tickets.
We got our Bills tickets officially. We're going. We will be there. Go get your tickets. I know training camp tickets are selling out in 3 seconds. I don't know where all these bandwagons came from, but welcome, I guess. Everybody have a great week. We'll be back probably Monday, right? Let's hope. All right.
Probably Monday.
Maybe sooner. We'll see what happens. All right. Thank you everybody for listening. Have a great week. Go Jets.